नमस्कार रसिको. संवादच्या एरवीच्या सत्रात आपण भारतीय मिथक आणि नृत्य, भारतीय शास्त्रीय नृत्य शैलींच्या बाबतीत काही महत्त्वपूर्ण मुद्दे आणि आजच्या सत्रात फार एक महत्त्वपूर्ण विषय घेतो म्हणजे समकालीन नृत्य आणि आज भारतीय सांस्कृतिक संदर्भात समकालीन नृत्याचं महत्त्व काय आहे यावर खूप एक डिटेल चर्चा होणार आहे. आणि आपल्या समक्ष मनदीप रेखी हे दिल्लीच्या गती डान्स फोरम याचे मॅनेजिंग डायरेक्टर आहेत असून आणि त्यांचं आत्ता नुकतंच प्रोडक्शन जे पूर्ण भारतभर टूर करत आहे क्वीन साईज त्यावर पण ते भाष्य करणार आहे आणि त्यांच्या आधीच्या कामावर आणि गती डान्स फोरम हे समकालीन परिस्थितीला कशा रीतीने सामोरे जात आहे आणि कशा रीतीने समकालीन नृत्य आपल्या समक्ष पोचत आहे यावर आपण खूप एक इंटरेस्टिंग चर्चा घेणार आहोत. Mandeep, I welcome you to this interview and I welcome on behalf of Samvaad.
Thank you.
Can you give us some information about Queen Size?
Yeah, so Queen Size began, the process of making it began last year. It began at a time where I felt this urgent need for dance to start responding to its context. I felt that we were at a time where something was brewing in the world outside. You know, there was there were raging debates in JNU about nationalism. There were people getting arrested, and there was this award wapsi that happened after the beef lynching. You know, there was a whole lot of stuff that was happening, and I felt like our field of dance was quite nothing stirred there. You know, it was asleep. It didn't respond. No artists sent back their Sangeet Natak awards. None of that happened in our field. Then I found that a bit problematic. Around the same time, I came across Nishit's article that he'd written for the Indian Express called "Why My Bedroom Habits Are Your Business," where he articulates that till the time we have equal rights as far as love and sex is concerned, then my bedroom habits remains everyone's business till the time we have equal rights. So I looked at this argument and I thought that this was an argument that I would like to respond to. I would like to respond to Nishit as a friend, as a partner, and also as someone who looked at private lives as holding much potency in the public sphere, which is what he did with his film Summer in My Veins, where he came out to his mother on camera, and that became the documentary film that we've all watched for decades now and became an international thing of, you know, it became a whole lot of strength for people to come out as to their parents. So that was really the time, that this was the time for me to respond to Nishit, to his work, to look at queer politics as a kind of space for me to frame a dance project in. And also a way for me to assert identity, because I felt like this was a time to assert identity. You know, it was the time to speak up or forever be silent.
Right. Queen Size takes place not on a proscenium theatre, but it takes place in intimate space. And the prop, if I may call it, actually it's a character, is the cart. What really was going in your mind when you chose cart to be there and the two bodies would explore with the cart?
So it started actually with, I got this idea when I went to Lalit, who's one of the dancers in the piece. I went to his house for lunch and we looked, I saw that there were about 10 carts in the house, and so I asked him to build one for us for the project. So he designed one which was queen size. Usually it's much smaller, but this was absolutely like measured to be queen size. And I was fascinated by the object for many reasons. One, it wasn't an elitist object. You know, it sat somewhere between the rural and urban landscapes of India. I was also excited by it because it was a kind of object that had a sense of patriarchy around it. You know, it's usually it's even the place where the panchayat sits. And I felt that what fascinated me about the object was also its character, that it made its own sound, that the dissent was quite audible actually with the object. And I felt also that there's a certain transparency that it comes with, that you can see under it, you can look through it, that there was no place to hide really, and that was important for the project.
Absolutely. When you look at your project, the previous project which was on the perception of masculinity, and then the previous one, Inhabited Geometry, of course you have your video pieces and other pieces also, but I'm focusing on these three. What range do you think you have traveled from A to B and B to C? And how? What led to these?
So each of the projects I think started with a bunch of questions that I had. Very much to do with the dance field, and also to do with somehow my relationship with the world. So with Inhabited Geometry, I had questions around Indianness, about what is it to be a dancer in India, be making work. I had this question of what do I do with my training that I've got in London? How do I make sense of it? How do I make work that's contextually seated here? So it was really a project for me to give myself the permission to use Bharatanatyam vocabulary as a resource to make new work. And what was interesting that I didn't have a kind of long history with the form. I learned it on the job with Shobna Jaising Dance Company in London. But I felt like maybe this difficulty that I had with owning the vocabulary was exactly the difficulty I wanted to frame as a what do you call it, project.
Right.
To say that Inhabited Geometry really was for me to look at how I can make the vocabulary of Bharatanatyam my home, and also in the process uncover all of these questions around home and Indianness that I was struggling with.
Yes.
And with Male and Straight Antennae, it stemmed out of my difficulties with masculinity. Felt like I was in this awkward position of being attracted to and fearing the same male body as I was growing up. And I felt like in a sense I hadn't really resolved that kind of binary, that kind of a relationship with masculinity. So the project really was to look at various notions of masculinity. How does one look at it as a construction? And if one is looking at it as a construction, what kinds of different notions can one construct and deconstruct was the project.
Something which is common in all of these is there is a potent question which is coming in your mind, and those questions lead to a particular concept, which means that a dancer is questioning his own existence with the relationship in relation to the context. And here is where probably I'm going to bring this question is, are dancers too passive and they don't question? We say we need to be thinking dancers, but we fear that if we question, then we might open up Pandora's box of troubles. So why is it that the whole element of questioning comes in theatre very easily, but is very passive when it comes to dance per se?
I think it has to do with a couple of things. One is that dance in this country is very often associated with the national identity. You know, the Indianness must be preserved in this field called dance. Our 4,000, 3,000, 5,000, you name it, that kind of history must be sitting in the form and must be present and be conserved and preserved. Must be ossified, so you're really sort of making mummies out of this form. So that's a problematic thing in the field, that the field doesn't have breathing space to reimagine, ask questions. This idea of patronage is a difficult one. The most kind of funding that is available comes from the state, and the state has very much a kind of agenda behind what kind of arts it wants to promote. This is not quite the case with theatre.
Right.
You know, theatre somehow in this country has been able to respond to its context, be political, extend the boundaries of its form quite a bit.
Also be economical.
And in that sense, it's way ahead of us, you know, as a field. But that's the one difficulty. The second difficulty is also in the way that we learn dance. we learn dance with this very insular kind of an attitude where dance itself is interesting, and that's really what we need to be preoccupied with.
Right.
But in a sense, if you look at literature, you wouldn't learn, you wouldn't be in a literature course without actually looking at politics, looking at economics in the world. So you respond to the world with your form, and that's not the case with dance. It really sort of becomes associated with itself.
Right.
And to a point where it carries this dead weight that doesn't even allow it to ask questions of itself.
Right.
Forget about the world.
Right. As managing director of Gati Dance Forum, you have probably witnessed the whole institution grow from a very small institution, from a small seed to now a big tree. And you have also seen a wide span of the changes in the manner in which contemporary dance is being viewed, perceived, and also been approached. In the recent years, obviously, contemporary dance, the word contemporary dance itself is known because of television and reality shows. How do you think this whole image of contemporary dance on TV is helping or not helping the contemporary dance scene, the serious genuine contemporary dance scene in India?
It's exactly the kind of argument that I had a couple of days ago about how queer visibility in film is, any visibility is good visibility. Dostana mein dikha to diye, and that's a good enough thing, but it's brought this the word gay out into the public space, and it's made it a household discussion. So with contemporary dance, I feel like it's also a kind of similar thing. That one argument one can build is that yes, at least now the word contemporary dance is easily available, people have a relationship with it. You know that there is dance beyond the classical and the Bollywood commercial dance. There's something in the middle.
Right.
So it's put itself forth out there for consideration. But the flip side for both kinds of visibility is also that if there hasn't been this sort of thinking through of what contemporary dance means, what does it imply, what does it mean to be a contemporary dance practitioner, does it mean that you're associated with a particular kind of form, or does it mean that you associate yourself with a kind of thinking process? Perhaps it is about a kind of an attitude with which you make work, a kind of relationship you have with your craft as well as the world around you. So that kind of thinking through of what is contemporary dance, I don't think we're any closer to it, even though there's more visibility and more people are now looking at contemporary dance as a professional possibility. But I don't think there's any more clarity on what this contemporary dance really is.
Which is why I'm going to also bring that whole interesting course which Gati Dance Forum is bringing about with regards to contemporary dance, the master's course. Would you like to share about what this course is going to focus on? And obviously, its focus is going to be produce thinking dances and how it's being designed by the think tank of Gati Dance Forum.
So we started looking at framing the structure around what a dance education in the country could actually be many years ago. So it's been a 4-year process really. So many years ago we looked at 5 strands that we wanted the education to rest on.
Right.
So training, creation, critical studies, allied disciplines, and professional development. So we looked at all dimensions of the field to look at how thinking, making, performing, researching are actually teaching are dimensions of the same field, and
right.
how one can't do one without the other.
Right.
And what are these kinds of relationships between these various dimensions? So that became the large structure of the course that we began to formulate, and we got about 40 practitioners and scholars from across the country and other parts of the world to respond to this structure with the kinds of modules that they thought they could contribute to a structure like this. So the course was really written out with inputs from about 30-40 people, And we began to have a conversation with them, look at what they have to offer, what's in the field. So really, it was a making of an MA that came from practitioners in the field.
Right.
So now we're at a point where this is about to be implemented next year in collaboration with the university
Right.
in Delhi. And we're pretty excited about actually starting it off.
Right. So how do you look at pedagogy which existed for contemporary dance during your time? How do you think has it changed now in a span of say 16 to 17 years? What do you think has really worked out well and what is still missing in the context of contemporary dance pedagogy?
So back in my time, which is about nearly 2 decades ago, when I was looking at education in contemporary dance, and I looked around me, and there wasn't any available in India. And since then, of course, things have shifted. There are 2 diplomas, one in Bangalore, one in Bombay, and they're looking at various different ways of looking at dance education. But the problem still remains that we're looking at dance much like the way we learn classical dance forms, is that just thinking through training of the body is all as far as we've gotten. Looking at choreography as a serious discipline isn't available at all. So yes, we've come far away. We've come to a point where now there are some institutions that seriously think about what contemporary dance education should be, but it's mostly to do with training. We still have a long way to go where we can think about what teaching in the field means, what research in the field has to do. So there's that work still to be done.
Right. And do you think this whole aspect of employment and dancing, employment and the performing artist is not really discussed openly either in the classical traditions or otherwise? How are you going to deal with this issue when you will be conducting this course? How are you going to negotiate this particular situation where how are you going to generate employment for them, basically?
So that's been a big concern for us.
Right.
We have been thinking through how if every 2 years there'll be 20 people who get generated by the MA and they leave the building, what do they do? So that was a serious concern for us, because unlike other parts of the world, there aren't companies that will absorb them. There aren't funding, there isn't funding that they will land on and start making work as choreographers. So if that's not available, then what can happen? And this really brought us back to how we started Kathi, which was to say that practitioners in this country can't just remain practitioners.
Right.
They've got to somehow, in their view of the field, have to think about ecology building. How do they build a network? How do they build a support structure for their own work, as well as really think through what building this field, how they can do it themselves.
Right.
Because there isn't anyone doing it for us. In this country, we don't have structures available to us where we can really be entitled practitioners and say, mere liye karo. You can do that, but that doesn't get you very far. And that something has shifted. Like you mentioned earlier, now we have practitioners in Pune as well, where they are looking at either setting up a residency or setting up a festival. There are lots of practitioners who have festivals now.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest shift that has happened in the field in the last. So that's the big rupture really.
Yes.
Since Atakaleri.
Yes.
Which was the last rupture.
Yeah.
To say now practitioners are taking their ecology into their hands.
Yes.
Building it, and as a result of that, there is now a network of practitioners across the country.
Right.
I think theatres had that for a little bit longer.
Yes,
already.
definitely.
And you sense it. But now dance is generating that. And I think the biggest example really was with Queen Size.
Absolutely.
Where when I decided I wanted to take it out of the metropolitan cities and I take it into all kinds of contexts other than the theatre, I realized that now there was a network of dancers that could actually hold a project like this in every city. and invite an audience to come and see it.
Right.
And in a way, for me to not do this all by myself, but there were people who were holding hands for a project like this.
Right.
So I feel like we're in a place now where very close to, or are in the process of savoring what the potential of a community is.
Right.
And I find that quite exciting.
संवादतर्फे मी मनदीप रेखींचा धन्यवाद करतो की त्यांनी आज खूप वेगळ्या वेगळ्या विषयांवर, समकालीन नृत्याच्या निगडीत सर्व विषयावर, त्याच्या धाटणीच्या बाबत, त्याच्या संरचनेच्या बाबतीत, त्याच्या शिक्षणाच्या बाबतीत आणि त्याच्या संस्थानीकरणाच्या बाबतीत या सर्व बाजूंवर खूप माहिती तर दिलीच, पण त्याचं विश्लेषणात्मक अध्ययन करण्याचा प्रयत्न केला आणि मी त्यांचे मनापासून धन्यवाद देतो. So thanks Mandeep for taking out your time in this hectic schedule. I'm sure you have great your shows lined up in other cities as well. So we wish you the best on behalf of Samvaad and Swarada for this great tour of Queen Size.
Thank you for having me.
आणि मी रसिकांना विनंती करतो की क्वीन साईज समजा तुमच्या शहरामध्ये असेल तर जरूर पहा. हा आगळा वेगळा प्रयोग आहे आणि याची धाटणी खूप आगळीवेगळी आहे संरचनेच्या दृष्टिकोनातून, आणि ज्या रीतीने आपण एका परफॉर्मन्सला बघतो त्या दृष्टिकोनातून सुद्धा हा प्रयोग खूपच वेगळा आणि काहीसा वेगळा दृष्टिकोन घेऊन जाईल. नमस्कार.